Three paths lie before you. You can offer yourself to them in death, a sacrifice befitting your years of prosperity. Or, to preserve your life, you can offer them the blood of another. But not just anyone. It must be the family that shares the lifeblood running in your veins.
Talou froze. The words didn't fully compute until they hammered like fists against his chest. Himself or his family? Killing the stranger would have been simple, but the spirits were unrelenting in their demand. They craved blood that would leave his soul scarred. With mounting dread, Talou came to a decision. His mother. His brother. The very people who had once stood by him through thick and thin, they had to die. In a small town in Nigeria, there lived a bright and kind-hearted boy named Talou. He was 17 years old, with big dreams and a warm smile. Talou loved to help others, whether it was helping his friends with their homework or picking up groceries for his mother. His mother, Mama Talou, was a single parent who worked very hard, but money was always tight. Mama Talou often looked worried, her brow creased with lines of concern. One day, while they were having dinner, she sighed deeply. "Talou, my son," she said softly, "things are very difficult for us. I need your help. You must learn to earn more money." Talou looked at his mother with love and concern. "But, Mama, I'm still in school. I want to finish my studies first." Mama Talou shook her head. "I understand, but I heard about a neighbor, Dyer. People say he has a way of making quick money. You should learn from him. We need it." Talou felt a knot in his stomach. He had heard whispers in the neighborhood about Dyer. Some said he was involved in bad things. "But, Mama, I don't want to do anything bad," he replied. Mama Talou placed her hand on Talou's. "I know, my son, but sometimes we have to make hard choices. We can't keep living like this." After thinking for a while, Talou nodded. "Okay, Mama. I will meet Dyer, but I will be careful." Little did Talou know, agreeing to meet Dyer would lead him into a world filled with darkness and danger. The next day, Talou walked to Dyer's house. As he approached, he felt nervous. Dyer was a tall man with sharp eyes that seemed to see right through you. He was friendly, but Talou could sense something strange about him. "Welcome, Talou," Dyer said with a wide grin. "I've heard a lot about you. Let's get started. I will show you the ropes." Dyer began to talk about how he made money. He told Talou stories about magic, luck, and a special kind of work called Yahoo Plus. "It's not just about computers, my friend. It's about getting what you want in life. But first, you must prove you are serious," Dyer said. Talou felt uneasy but nodded. "What do I have to do?" "Tonight, you must sleep with 5 girls at once," Dyer said. "It's a test. You need to show your commitment to the craft." Talou's heart raced. "But I don't want to hurt anyone," he protested. Dyer's eyes darkened. "Listen, this is how things are done. If you want the money, you must be ready for anything." With a heavy heart, Talou agreed. He thought about his mother and their struggles. Maybe this was just one step to better things. But deep down, he felt something was very wrong. That night, Talou found himself in a dimly lit room, feeling confused and scared. The girls were there, and they seemed to understand that Talou was forced into this. He did what he had to do, but inside, he felt like he was losing a piece of himself. The next day, Dyer congratulated him. "You did well. But there's more to come. Now, we have to do a TikTok giveaway. You must spend 200 million naira. This is how you seed your wealth," he said. 200 million naira? Talou gasped. "Where will I get that money?" Dyer smirked. "That's the secret. You'll find a way. You want to be rich, don't you?" Talou's mind was spinning. This was no longer just about helping his mother. It was becoming a nightmare. But Dyer had a hold over him now, and he felt trapped. Everyone in the village whispered about her, the mad woman of Alluring Grove, a figure of fear and revulsion, the living embodiment of suffering. She hadn't been born mad, so the elders said. Her insanity had visited her like a storm after her family burned alive in a mysterious fire. Since then, she wandered the edges of the village, her matted hair an untamed crown, her laughter more chilling than a midnight wind. Tolu clenched his fists. Madness for 3 years? He'd seen what that fate looked like. His cousin Femi had been through it, a young man once vibrant with promise, reduced to a raving shell who spoke to shadows and screamed at whispers. Tolu couldn't endure that. But the alternative burned his very soul. To lay with a woman incapable of understanding, incapable of consent? How could he sink that low? The decision haunted him for a week. Ayant had given him time, watching him with the piercing eyes of a man who had already seen too many souls crumble under choices like this. Eventually, Tolu's pride tipped the scale. He couldn't lose his mind, not when he was on the brink of victory, not when 2 tasks were already behind him. He convinced himself it was mercy, even kindness. Maybe I can bring her joy for one night, he thought, though the lie barely made it past his lips. Deep down, Tolu knew it wasn't kindness, only cowardice wrapped in a fine cloth. The night was quiet when he approached the grove. In his hand was a bottle of palm wine, in his heart, a knot so tight he thought it might choke him. The mad woman sat in her usual spot, humming an aimless tune to the wind. Tolu had seen her from afar before, but standing this close, he realized how human she was. She was thin, yes, and her nails were jagged, but her face, beneath the wildness, still bore traces of beauty, of the young girl she must have once been. Something about her fragility made what he was about to do even worse. I brought you wine, he said softly, crouching to meet her at eye level. She turned her head sharply, her eyes gleaming with mistrust. Wine, she repeated, her voice breaking like dry leaves. But there was hunger in her gaze, and Tolu knew he had her. The details of what followed remained foggy in Tolu's mind, blurred by shame and a desperate need to forget. All he knew was that it was over too quickly, yet every moment dragged on endlessly. When it was done, Tolu left the grove without looking back. He didn't see the mad woman clutch her belly months later, nor hear her murmur his name like a curse when her pregnancy became evident. But Tolu couldn't escape the weight of what he had done. Even when the flow of money began, seemingly out of nowhere, bags of cowries hidden under his bed, strangers handing him gold coins, he couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. His guilt festered as the mad woman became a pariah within an already marginalized existence, her pregnancy drawing fear and scorn from villagers. Tolu paid her no mind publicly, but in the privacy of his thoughts, he saw her face constantly. And then came her words, whispered in a chance encounter months later, "You think you've gained everything, but you've lost your soul." The fortune couldn't block out the nightmares that crept into Tolu's sleep. The spirits didn't appear immediately. At first, Tolu thought he had escaped unscathed. The windfalls of his newfound wealth consumed him. With every sunrise, his riches multiplied. He expanded his home, showered his mother with gifts, and threw lavish feasts for villagers who once dismissed him as ordinary. People began calling him Tolu the Fortunate. Women looked at him differently, their once dismissive stares turning into flirtatious glances. But the praise and adoration that had once seemed so distant now felt strange, sharp at the edges, like poorly cut glass. It began subtly, the first visitation. He woke one night to the sound of soft weeping. His room was bathed in moonlight, and the air smelled faintly of rain. At first, he thought it was a dream. But when he rolled over, he came face to face with a figure shrouded in shadow. Her eyes glittered with sadness, her face one he recognized instantly, Bola, the second woman he had been forced to lay with. Her skin glistened as if drenched in tears, and her lips moved, though no sound came out. Tolu tried to scream, but his voice refused him. When he blinked, she was gone. He brushed it off as fatigue, but the dreams persisted. Each night, a different woman appeared to him, some crying, others screaming, their voices rattling in his skull. By the 10th night, he stopped sleeping, his once youthful face carved with dark circles. He avoided mirrors. Every time he glimpsed his reflection, he swore he saw someone standing behind him. The worst revelation came during his visits to town. Tulu, in his arrogance, had distributed a portion of his wealth to the needy in a grand gesture of generosity. A better life for all, he had called it. But those he had blessed appeared to wither under his gaze. One woman, Oluchi, had once danced with joy upon receiving Tulu's gold. Now she sat slumped by the market stalls, her hands trembling and eyes distant, an addict without cure. Another man, Kola, had used Tulu's money to start a business, only to lose it all in a string of misfortunes. One by one, they came to him, their gratitude turned to confusion, then resentment. "You gave me hope, only to take it away," one told him as he begged for alms. Tulu's paranoia grew as whispers circled the village. Stories of bad luck spread like wildfires, and everywhere he went, glances turned sharp and accusatory. His mother, unaware of the darker currents around him, flourished in her son's wealth. She walked with her head high, attended every gathering, and spoke with pride about Tulu's ascent. "My son is a man of destiny," she would say, her laughter infuriatingly bright. But Tulu didn't feel like a man of destiny. He felt like a man cursed. Though the wealth continued to flow and his name climbed higher in the village's esteem, his heart felt as though it had been hollowed out. It wasn't just guilt anymore, it was the spirits, the whispers, and the weight of knowing that every smile he received carried with it a hidden blade. The nights were no longer a refuge for Tulu. His dreams had become a battlefield, plagued by the spectral forms of the 5 women he had once used as pawns in his ascension to wealth. Their faces floated in the depths of his subconscious, their eyes filled with an eerie mixture of sorrow and rage. They didn't whisper, they didn't shout, they simply stared. The silence was far more unsettling. One particularly grim night, Tulu found himself in the middle of an endless market square in his dream. The stalls were manned not by vendors but by the ghosts of the women. One woman, who had once been a cheerful university student before her untimely demise, handed him blood-soaked naira notes. Another spoke in riddles, warning him of a darkness he couldn't escape. Each visit pulled him deeper into despair. By day, the chaos extended to the real world. Tulu prided himself on being a man of generosity, but the after-effects of his charitable giveaways came back to haunt him in sinister ways. People he once gave money to found their lives spiraling downward. A teenage boy he had handed wads of cash to during a street giveaway had become an addict, arrested several times for petty theft. A seamstress who had gifted him a jacket, after being showered with his money in return, lost her entire business after inexplicably gambling everything away. The community that once hailed Tulu as a messianic figure now feared and resented him. He could sense their whispers at every corner, accusations, half-formed curses hissed in his direction. Yet, ignorant of the larger picture, his community unwittingly saw his mother as the benefactor and upheld her as a symbol of honor and grace. She reveled in her elevated status, hosting lavish gatherings and speaking glowingly about the son who had made it. Tulu's facade began to crack. Alone in his multi-story mansion, he often stared at his reflection in the mirror, unable to recognize the man he had become. Wealth, once his liberation, now felt like a sentence. Unbeknownst to him, the greater price had yet to be paid. By the 5th anniversary of his pact with the group, Tulu's life had developed into a pattern of indulgence and discontent. He was wealthier than ever, but his existence felt hollow. He still avoided revisiting the pact's terms, pretending the growing malignance in his life didn't exist. That illusion shattered with Dyer's death. Dyer, Tulu's closest confidant and the one who had introduced him to the secret of Coven, turned up dead in his luxurious home one morning. The newspapers reported it as a heart attack, but Tulu knew better. Worms crept from all the openings on his body and over 1,000 vultures flew around his mansion. Nothing about Dyer's death was of natural causes. Dyer had been acting strangely in the days leading up to his death, missing meetings, mumbling cryptic warnings about a mistake he could never undo. The truth came 2 days later, when Tulu was summoned by the group's spiritual leader, the Grand Master. Inside the dim, incense-filled chamber of the leader's mansion, Tulu felt the weight of foreboding settle over him. The spiritual leader spoke bluntly, his voice cold and devoid of emotion. Dyer disobeyed, the Grand Master said with finality. He tried to circumvent the rules laid out for him. His greed outgrew his loyalty. Tulu tried to swallow the lump forming in his throat, but it was impossible. What rule did he break? The Grand Master's hollow eyes locked onto Tulu. To live in wealth is to sacrifice. You know this. Dyer refused when it was time to pay the price. He to end a life, so the spirits showed him another way. Tulu's legs almost gave way. Will it happen to me? He asked, his voice trembling. The Grand Master gave nothing away except a warning, sharper than a dagger. We all have our time, Tulu. Break the covenant, and you will meet the same end. The anxiety that followed was unbearable. Tulu walked through life as if suspended in a waking nightmare. He leaned heavily into his riches, surrounding himself with fleeting enjoyments to stave off the terror. But nothing could prepare him for the fateful meeting that followed, a meeting where the Grand Master delivered the ultimatum that would finally break him. 3 weeks after Dyer's death, Tulu found himself once more in the Grand Master's chamber. This time, the leader's tone was harsher, colder, and merciless.
The spirits demand payment.
The Grand Master intoned gravely.
3 paths lie before you. You can offer yourself to them in death, a sacrifice befitting your years of prosperity. Or, to preserve your life, you can offer them the blood of another. But not just anyone. It must be the family that shares the lifeblood running in your veins.
Tulu froze. The words didn't fully compute until they hammered like fists against his chest. Himself or his family? He stuttered in protest. But what if I refuse altogether? The Grand Master met his desperation with chilling finality.
You will be taken, and it will be slow. Remember that your friend, Dahia?
For days, Tulu wrestled with the choice. Facing his own mortality felt unbearable. He had come too far to give it all up. Killing the stranger would have been simple, but the spirits were unrelenting in their demand. They craved blood that would leave his soul scarred. With mounting dread, Tulu came to a decision. His mother. His brother. The very people who had once stood by him through thick and thin, they had to die. Tulu felt trapped. He thought about his mother, a kind woman who worked hard on her farm. She had raised him with love and care, always teaching him the value of family. The only thing wrong she did was to motivate him to join his friend in this blood-sucking game. Then there was Tunde, his younger brother, who looked up to him. Tunde is so innocent, God. Tulu moaned bitterly. He was right. Tunde was innocent and full of dreams, but now he stood between Tulu and survival. The night before the day it must happen, Tulu's mind raced with thoughts of what he must do. He wanted to scream, to cry, but he felt frozen. He couldn't kill himself. The thought of leaving Tunde and his mother alone was unbearable. So, with a heavy heart and trembling hands, Tulu made his dreadful decision. He would kill them both. The next morning, Tulu went to the farm where his mother worked. She was bent over, tending to the crops. The sight of her made Tulu's heart ache, but he steeled himself. He grabbed the sharp tool from the ground. Tears streamed down his face as he approached her. Mama, I'm sorry, he whispered, before carrying out the terrible act. The sound of his mother's cries echoed in his ears, but he was too far gone to stop. He could not think, he only felt the weight of what he had done. As he looked down at her lifeless body, he realized he was now a monster. But he still had one last act to complete. Tunde was next. With the sun rising higher, Tulu felt a strange mix of fear and determination as he walked towards home. He tried to push thoughts of his mother out of his mind, but the image of her face haunted him. What have I done? He whispered to himself, but he knew he had no choice. As he approached the village, whispers filled the air. People were gathering, their faces filled with anger and confusion. Word had spread about Tulu's horrific deed, and they were not going to let him go unpunished. Before he could reach Tunde, at the school gate, an angry mob surrounded him. They shouted, demanding to know why he had committed such a crime. Tulu's heart raced as he tried to explain, but no one wanted to hear his excuses. The villagers had lost their trust in him, and anger filled their hearts. They forced the boot to his car open and saw the bag in which he kept the severed head of his beloved mom. A tricycle rider rolled out her head like dice, and this infuriated the mob the more. They moved closer to Tulu, their faces twisted with fury. Tulu's mind raced. He could see the pain he had caused and the sorrow he had brought to his community. Just as he opened his mouth to plead for mercy, they surged forward, dragging him to the ground. He struggled, but the crowd was too strong. "You must pay for your sins," someone shouted. Tulu felt the weight of their anger crashing down on him. In that moment, he understood the price of his terrible choice. Amidst tumultuous blows rained on his head, he heard someone call for fuel. Another person asked for tires and more woods. Before law enforcement could arrive, the mob had taken matters into their own hands. Tulu, once a son and a brother, lay defeated at their feet. As his life slipped away, he realized that his greed and desperation had led to this tragic end. Tunde, his brother, came out of the gate. As his blood dropped from his head, trickling down his swollen eyes, he saw his brother cry for helplessly cry him. He wished he could use his last strength to say, "Never be desperate like Mom and I, my brother," but I would HT him and sent his head down hard to the tarred road. Fuel bathed his numb body. A match was lit. Fire. He was sacrificed to the god of greed in front of his brother's school. The sun shone brightly above the village, but Tulu's story was a dark reminder of how far one could fall when faced with impossible choices. He left behind a community torn by his actions, a mother lost forever, and a brother who would never know the love of his sibling again. The cost of greed and despair was heavy, and Tulu had paid it with his life.
Thank you for watching to the very end. Congratulations, you've unlocked your chance to win our prize. To enter, simply leave a comment below. 1. Start with the name of your favorite character from this story. 2. Tell us where you're watching from. 3. And share at least one lesson you've learned from this story. The comment with the most likes and replies by 4 p.m. GMT tomorrow will be our winner. Get commenting, and good luck! I'll see you again on our next story. Until then, stay booky booky.